Hello, you amazing people. Welcome back to RX Memes. Today we're going to be jumping into r/ProRevenge. I have two really good stories for you. I hope you enjoy them, and let's get right into the video. Make my life at work miserable? You'll never work again with me. I used to work at a medium-sized IT services company and had recently been moved to a smaller branch office with a nice pay raise. I was basically my own team and got to do interesting work on a large project. Since they were satisfied with the work but needed it to be done on a larger scale, the company hired another person to help me. Meet Fred. I knew Fred from outside work, through common relationships, and I didn't find him any weirder than other nerdy people in the business. Oh boy, Fred was good at technical work. Very good. When it came to human interactions, though, it was something else. Fred thought of me as his only friend in the workplace and would bitch all day long about all other colleagues who were all equally incompetent, weird, evil, and generally deserving of his scorn. Fred had a terrible tendency of telling other people we had to work with that they were doing things wrong and that their software was crap, which was often technically right, but completely forgetting the constraints in which other people had to work and that there might have been reasons for things that now sounded awful, which is basically always the case in IT. People resented both of us as a team for things he said, and some situations became entrenched. It was getting harder every day for me to get to work. Eventually, he made a lot of enemies and got a meeting with the division director. It only lasted a few minutes, during which he told the boss of 800 people that he was an evildoer. It was his last day in the company. I worked alone from that time and managed to finish most of the project, smoothing things over with other teams. A few months later, I got an offer for the job of my dreams in a huge utility company. After starting the work, guess who I discover working right here as a contractor under my direct supervision? Fred. Fred looked so happy to find a friend again. He spent most of my first day at work telling me how the company was awful, everyone was dumb, and everything was insufferable. I went home that night feeling horrible, wondering how much of what he told me was true and how bad it would be to work there. Turns out, after a few hard starting days, it really was the job of my dreams. Acting now with Fred as a client and not a colleague, I managed to keep him in check and to improve a lot of the perceived quality of the team's work. Prior to my hiring, Fred was basically telling people to fuck off whenever they were asking him things he didn't want to work on. Having someone who could see through his bullshit to manage him got the roadmap back on track. Eventually, I learned that my colleagues had been very wary about working with me at the beginning because Fred had been bad-mouthing me from the day he learned I had been hired to manage him. This had made the first weeks difficult until they understood he had been lying about it all. About 2 years later, I was now team manager and my boss comes into my office and asks me about a hiring issue. There's a new position in the team, and the recruiter asked him about someone with excellent technical skills who sounded very arrogant. Guess who wanted to work as my colleague again? If you followed the story, you've got it right. It's Fred. I did not let out to my boss the slightest bit of resentment. I explained to him how he was a very competent person, but that he might just lack a bit of the skills required for our company's teamwork. I knew exactly what I had to say for my boss to never want to hire him, ever, without making it about our personal history. I only told what happened to a close coworker, and he sounded very thankful to hear that he would not have to work with Fred as a colleague. A few months later, his company lost the contract and Fred was hired by the new contractor. However, they were not as lenient with him as his previous company was, and another few months later, I was finally Fred free. Last I heard of him, he was working at a Silicon Valley giants on a project that was in a worldwide media shitstorm over technical issues. I keep wondering whether he was telling everyone else in his team how bad at their job they were and how much he contributed to that massive failure. Blame me for your mistake? Lose your job. This story was relayed to me from the teachers at my old high school and is about the school's administration. This all happened last school year. TLDR at the end. First, some background. The principal of my school, we'll call him Matt, had been with the school since it started up in the early 2000s. He worked his way up from a regular teacher to the principal, and then assistant superintendent, although he spent most of his time at the high school. His immediate superior, who we'll call Katie, was pretty much a figurehead while he did all the administrative stuff, for not just the high school, but the rest of the district. The thing was that Matt was a narcissist. He constantly belittled and berated students. He once publicly told an entire graduating class that he would make sure that none of them graduated and that they were all the worst the school had ever had. There were also numerous other instances of him doing this stuff to students in private, especially with the kids who did the school announcements, which he also ran. I had 2 friends on there. One was dismissed, a student volunteer, out of nowhere for literally no reason. The other was fired. She chose to work for the school after graduating, after calling him out for saying she was worthless. Despite this, all of our teachers assured us that Matt wasn't as bad as we thought he was. We never believed them because we thought they were just covering for him. After we graduated, we discovered that he was indeed not as bad as we thought. He was worse. Matt frequently told the teachers that they were worthless, dumb, that he could fire them, and that anyone could do their jobs. From what we saw over the years, it didn't take a lot for him to fire anyone. Now, at this point, you may wonder why Katie didn't step in and at least try to tell him to knock his shit off. Well, again, he did all the admin stuff. They were also friends from back in the day, so while she heard numerous complaints about him, she never acted on them. Now on to the revenge. Like everywhere else, the state mandates that we take their standardized tests. The state was always very clear about when the deadlines for the tests were, what portions were to be taken by each grade, and what the penalties were for not making the deadlines. A few weeks prior to the deadline, the school gets issued all parts of the test except for the science portion. Matt says he'll talk to the Department of Education and get it squared away. After a couple weeks, they still don't have the portion they need, and Katie asks where it is. Matt informs everyone that the state said they didn't have to take it. Some of you might be wondering why the state would say they didn't need to take it after making a big deal about it. The answer is simple. They didn't. Matt, in his infinite narcissistic wisdom, decided not to get them. Because of this, the state opened an investigation and held meetings about revoking the charter for the entire district, essentially shutting them down. But Matt didn't get in trouble. Since Katie was superintendent, it was her job to make sure those tests were ordered. The story ended up going public and Katie took full responsibility for the screw-up. Matt also berated her in private life like he did with everyone else. She later steps down from her position as superintendent, but maintained her positions on the school board and the corporate board. Remember this for later. Matt takes over as superintendent of the entire district. Matt could have stopped there, but being a narcissist and a dictator, he doesn't. He publishes a scathing open letter on the school's website blaming her for the whole ordeal and the fallout. He then has the principals of the other schools do the same. As far as the media, the public, and the Department of Education are concerned, the whole affair was due entirely to Katie's utter incompetence. Matt also continues berating her in private. After 2 months, the state decides that they aren't going to shut down the district, much to everyone's relief. Some months later, they go back to not giving 2 shits what a small chartered district does. Now that there are no eyes on them, Katie starts making moves. She wants to get control of the district back from Matt, now that she knew all the claims the students, parents, and employees made over the years were true. As I mentioned earlier, she did maintain her position on the school board, and they could theoretically remove him. The problem was that the other 2 people on there were put on there by Matt, so she'd always be on the minority on any vote. But also, as I mentioned earlier, she had a position on the corporate board, a body whose decisions and authority superseded that of the school board. She goes about gradually restaffing the corporate board. When Matt asks her why, she says it's to make sure that a similar mistake would never occur again. Matt believes her and thinks nothing of it. After about a month, she added 7 people, including her husband, onto the corporate board. They hold their first meeting and then call in Matt to inform him of their first order of business. He was being given the option to resign, and if he didn't resign, he'd be fired. Matt, not really having a choice, resigns. The next day, the high school's principal, a friend of his, also resigned. The day after that, the athletics director for the high school, Matt's son, followed suit. Katie then takes over in the interim and begins looking around for people to fill all the positions that Matt had consolidated. I think there were 7 or 8 in total. The teachers and faculty all breathed a sigh of relief knowing they didn't need to be afraid of being fired at the drop of a hat anymore. As for the students, they hardly noticed. My old English teacher put it as, not even a ripple. Outside of those differences, the only thing anyone noticed after Matt and his cronies left was that a lot of really nice furniture went missing.